Well, g'day, Dev. Welcome to the show, man. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. We've hung out at events. We've done a bunch of stuff together, man. So, yeah, I've been looking forward to getting you on here, man. So thanks for showing up and sharing your wisdom with us.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Peter. Thank you for having me.
So, man, can you tell us about some of the work that you do and the people that you work with?
Sure. So, simply put, I work with thoughtful organizations and passionate entrepreneurs, leveraging their branding and marketing strategy. And what that specifically means in layman's terms is that I work with organizations and entrepreneurs who want to figure out what their message is, what the ideal audience is to communicate that message to, and what kind of language patterns and communication methodologies that they need to be using to get that message across effectively.
Okay, so sort of big in that personal branding type stuff and helping people to understand that.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so who are the types of people? So, you work with non-profits and business owners, and, it's two very different worlds to some degree. So could you explain a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, no problem. The reason that I have that kind of disparate experience is because I guess my journey in this line of work started working with small NGOs. So it started in management consulting, working with a state government-funded organization in New South Wales, in Sydney, working with NGOs who essentially needed capacity building and management consulting type support. It was a role that I fell into quite incidentally, quite accidentally, and by chance, I happened to love what I do and happened to be really good at it. So it was through that experience that I kind of started. So in industry, for those of you who don't know, it's very networking based. You end up having a lot of coffees and a lot of teas, and you go to a lot of meetings and you meet a lot of people, and it's a great experience because you meet a lot of people from different walks of life who are kind of in transition, usually from doing one thing to doing another thing. So in that industry, I met a lot of people who were moving away from the government funding model into setting up social enterprises. So what that means is essentially setting up it could be a nonprofit, could be a for-profit organization that had a social consciousness model implemented into the business. So doing something for some sort of community development work, some sort of social good intentions, but essentially a business. And generally what would happen is I would make friends with these people and I would sit down with them and they would say, Dave, you've got a kind of a business background, given your studies and also given your experiences working with, management teams and leaders of these smaller organizations. Maybe you can give us some advice. And I was like, I'll see what I can do. So we would sit down and, we'd catch up and I'd say, okay, what's the deal? What do you want to do? What's your problem? What's the situation? Where do you want to be? I would ask them, the general kind of questions. And to be honest, it was just me being very curious about how I might be able to help and gathering information in that process. In that due process, I would inevitably whip out my sketchpad. Now, my company name is Sketchpad Ideas, and that's where it actually comes from. Because for some reason, just randomly, I've always liked working with sketchpads and not notepads or notebooks.
Yeah.
It's just a weird quirk that I've had. So when the time came to figure out a name for my business, it seemed like a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
So I would sit down with my friends and help them out, and all of a sudden that they found that they were actually doing quite well given the advice that I was giving. So I did this for one person, did it for another person, did it for another organization, and alongside that time, people started asking me hey, we've got this event on. Why don't you come and actually give a talk on this kind of stuff? You can give a talk on social media. You can give a talk on branding and marketing and whatever you understand about setting up a business. Because you seem to know your stuff. And again, it was just one of those things. I said, yeah, sure, I wouldn't mind developing my public speaking skills and getting in front of an audience, getting some attention. Why not? So I did that a couple of times, and a couple of quite large organizations started liking what I'm doing and getting me on board onto their stages as well. And what essentially happened was that I was consulting as a kind of a hobby with friends, and I was kind of speaking and doing training kind of as part of my job, but also kind of doing favors for friends and doing just personal kind of type of like a hobby kind of a gig with some organizations. There came a point where I realized that, you know what, I really love doing this, and I realized that there are people who are doing pretty much what I do, simply just swimming in different circles, that are actually making a lot of money doing it and having a really great impact on a lot of different kind of people. And I want to do that. So that's kind of how my journey transitioned from working with nonprofits and NGOs professionally to working with businesses, social enterprises, creative enterprises, almost as a very part-time, on-the-side, curiosity-based kind of intention, to doing what I do now, which is working with entrepreneurs and organizations who have that social consciousness intention, but don't necessarily know how to actually go about, articulating their brand or even establishing their brand in the first place to make sure that they're actually reaching out to their audiences. And now, I'm doing it professionally. I get to work with some amazing people. I've had the chance to get paid to speak on stages. We're connecting with hundreds of audiences, hundreds of people in audiences, and yeah, it's been a great transition, great journey. And mind you, I'm still very young, and it's still building up.
Okay, 3 questions. How old are you?
I'm 26, turning 27.
Okay, what does NGO mean?
NGO means non-government organization.
Okay,
I'm glad you asked, actually.
Yeah, just to clarify, because it's one of those things. It's you kind of just hear a term and you think you know what it is, and it's like, some people might not know.
It's a bad habit.
And
I should just clarify as well. A lot of people ask me this. I may as well take this opportunity. A non-government organization is not a government organization. It's called a non-government organization because it's essentially a non-profit that is primarily funded by government to operate. So you're talking about welfare organizations, youth centers, domestic violence refuges, neighborhood centers, those kind of organizations.
Okay, and the other one is the social aspect of these businesses. What were you calling it? Social
enterprise.
Social enterprise. Could you just clarify what that means for someone who's listening out there that might not know what that means?
Sure. So basically a social enterprise, and look, there are different interpretations to this. There's a lot of technical jargon and terminology that gets thrown around. My idea is quite broad of what a social enterprise really is, and essentially it's an enterprise set up on the foundation of an intention of doing social good. So based in social justice principles, to support social cause, and they tend to overlap with environmental causes as well.
So when you say with some of those causes, could you sort of clarify what those would be? Like, what are some specifics on that?
Sure. So let's say working with marginalized communities, working for championing environmental causes, working with people who are underprivileged in society, advocacy models, organizations that are looking to do social good in a way that's self-sustainable, so not dependent on grants, sponsorships, and funding. Mm-hmm. And I also consider cultural organizations as well. So I work with artists and cultural development organizations, a couple of film festivals I've worked with as well. I consider them social enterprises as well.
Okay, so and how are you helping these guys out? Like, this is essentially what your business is about now, so this is your social enterprise, you could say as well, I guess. Would that be a true statement?
It's interesting. There's a lot of stigma around that term, especially with people who want to kind of run away from that. And I have to admit, I was one of those people as well. My experiences in the community sector, which is primarily the NGO sector, but kind of borderlines with social enterprise as well, has been very bittersweet. It's been sweet in the sense that you meet the most amazing people who have such amazing intentions to help people's lives and change the world. But it's been bitter because there's a real culture of stagnation. People are not necessarily the most entrepreneurial, or they're very risk averse in many ways. They're very embedded in their way of doing things, and change. It's ironic actually, because it's so much about social change, yet they're so resistant to actually changing their way of doing things themselves. And when I got into the world where I guess I met you, into the entrepreneurship space, and started hanging around with people and getting training from people like people that you've interviewed, Dr. Rich, you were mentioning earlier.
Yep.
Jeff Slater, Kane Minkus, Travis Bell you've had on the show, Roscoe Patterson you've had on the show, and hanging out with these guys, I've realized it's a different kind of mindset, but at the same time, you wouldn't be wrong to almost classify them as social enterprises as well, by that definition, because what I've realized is that everyone is struggling one way or another. Everyone, when they have an aspiration to do something along the lines of wanting to leave a legacy in the world, has an aspiration to make an impact on the world. Whether you want to be the next Steve Jobs or the next Bill and Melinda Gates or just the next, Peter Montgomery, you want to have a positive impact on the world, and you want to do something for the society and the communities that you live around and are affected by. And it really just becomes a matter of what kind of modalities you want to do that through, whether you want to do that through working with... I remember actually Jeff told me this once. I think he said it in a group environment at one of his trainings. He said, it's really your choice. You can work to have an impact directly on a homeless person, and you can go and give that homeless person shelter and food for a night or a week or whatever it is, or you can work with the systems and the people who actually have the power and influence to build those homes for the homeless people. And it's a very broad metaphor, but I guess given my experiences, I've seen how that translates throughout various sectors of marginalized societies and communities.
So effectively, like, say the work that all these guys are doing, when they help people, say like you and me, to go out and do what we do better, they're facilitating us getting better at the things that we want to do, so that we can help others who want to, for example, like I want to help guys like you kind of get your message across, and all those guys that have been on the show, I want to get their message across because they're out there doing some good work. So that this work here has this chain reaction that keeps going through. If everyone is kind of focused in on this type of business model, I guess, it's almost, what's that? You said it before, we're having a conversation before, like it's like a positive feedback loop. It just keeps cycling in on itself and expanding and growing.
That's right. My story began a few years ago when I finished my undergraduate degree. I did a degree in medical science and business, sort of a combined double degree. And when I finished, I went to medical school to train to be a doctor. And things didn't quite work out. 6 months in, I felt very ill, and I had a bit of a near-death experience. And that near-death experience kind of compelled me to take a step back. And like literally, I had to defer my studies, and I had a significant amount of time off from basically doing anything. And I was compelled to really reflect and think about what it is that I actually wanted to do with my life. What kind of message I wanted to leave, what kind of audience I wanted to communicate with, what kind of communities I wanted to have an impact on. So this was before I had actually done any work in this kind of line of work, had done any work with nonprofits, NGOs, or anything of the sort. I was just, pretty much fresh out of uni, rough around the edges, whatever you want to call it. And, it was through that time, not necessarily immediately then, but as I was recovering, that I realized that there's a real us and them mentality when it comes to entrepreneurship. People feel like you're either a part of the system of entrepreneurship where you're trying to do something that's greater than your own existence and create something that's bigger than your ego. I like to put it in slightly spiritual terms in that way. And then there's the them and us kind of other side of the coin, where people are really thinking like, okay, there's those people who are out there to, make the millions and get their Ferraris and, build their big mansions. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all, in my opinion. I'm not anti-capitalist, but I feel that because of that disconnect and disparateness, I've realized that there are a lot of people who are actually more marginalized than, and more even homeless in a sense, than marginalized communities and homeless people, for example. And the reason is because they live their life in this kind of cycle of expectations and social conditioning and social programming of what society expects them to do, what society expects us to do, and what kind of standards they expect us to conform by, that we never really find a true sense of belonging, because we're always afraid of stepping out of that expectation, stepping out of that social conditioning and social programming to do something greater than ourselves. So we stay there. We stay with this false sense of belonging that actually makes us feel more disconnected than ever. And I remember that's exactly how I felt when, when I was recovering from medical school and had to kind of make this decision about whether to go back or not to go back, whether to be a doctor, where I was getting a lot of praise and a lot of pats on the backs for, being in this, going down this career path, which was considered very prestigious and considered very noble and considered like, this is what you should be doing. This is amazing, good on you, Dev, for doing this. But I wasn't happy on it because even if I became a good doctor, I was being a good doctor or being a good professional or whatever it was by other people's standards. And I guess I was very lucky because I had a very supporting and loving family and some amazing friends at the time who helped me kind of escape that sense of obligation, almost a moral and societal sense of obligation, and kind of think for myself and then go through that process of struggle, of trying to figure out what it is that I really wanted to do, what kind of mark that I really wanted to create. But when I found it, suddenly I was entering this world, with all these other people, these names that I mentioned, of the people that you have interviewed as well, where so many other people were going through the same struggle, and there was this community of individuals and to some extent organizations as well that were striving for the same thing, to step up above their existence and make a mark on the world and really create change in their societies and their communities, but not necessarily doing it by what other people think it means to change the world.
Okay, now, I'm kind of, as you're speaking, I'm kind of thinking of my own journey and kind of relating to certain things you're saying there. That thing about going from one set of standards and expectations of, you're going down that path to be a doctor, and then having that sort of almost taken away from you, and then having to make a choice now, do I want to go back or do I want to pursue something else? Like it's kind of a bit of a no man's land. Like I've been in that situation myself. And entering into this world that we're both in now with this community of people, and feeling like you don't belong there where you used to be, and you don't belong in there yet, but you want to be there and you want to belong. So how did you kind of work through that transition? Because in effect, it's I guess it's like an identity crisis. Like, who am I? What do I want to do? Why am I here? So how did you work through that?
Yeah.
What helped you, man, to get through that situation? Because it sucks. It's hard, painful stuff.
It is. How did I do it? With great difficulty. Look, in some ways it was the most blessed times of my life. In some ways it was the most traumatic experiences. There were things that go so much beyond what, even what I'm prepared to share publicly, I guess. But as much as I can offer, I guess the lesson that really came out of it for me was that when I started on that journey, I started making a transition by running away from something. It was kind of like this fear of that no man's land. I just wanted to find a sense of belonging, and I became really, really impatient and really, really restless. And I realized that that actually caused me a lot more harm than good. I spent probably thousands of dollars on trying to learn what to do and trying to fit in and belong in seminars and various educational processes. I spent hundreds of hours associating with people that I probably shouldn't have associated with, and just found myself on the wrong side of the tracks in a sense, because again it was a fear of uncertainty. I would rather have some sense of belonging than nothing. And what I realized is that a lot of people actually do this when they're in business, and they do it with their businesses. You see, what happens is that they're afraid of not having a sense of belonging, or they're afraid of some sort of rejection or isolation of their brands, of their businesses. So they basically go out and try and work with the first person that comes their way, or whoever it is that will take them. And what essentially ends up happening is that they don't really end up serving anybody, because they haven't really found a place where they belong and given themselves the time and patience to figure that out. How I did it personally was, I guess, twofold. One was that I had, like I said, the loving support of my family and a bit of mentorship over there as well. The other was, I consider myself lucky, because I really stumbled upon the support networks of people like Jeff and Kane and Bill Walsh and people who have studied under them, but are also helping entrepreneurs as well, almost by accident. But I consider there's not really any accidents. Everything kind of happens for a reason, one way or another. But what I do attribute to myself, which I can advise other viewers watching this who find themselves in a similar, I guess, crossroads or a similar sense of restlessness, is that I ask myself, what did I really want to have as my legacy? Now, this was not about how much money I wanted to make. It was not about what kind of car I wanted to drive or what kind of house I wanted to have. It wasn't even really about helping people, to be honest, because a lot of people say, figure out how you want to help people, don't worry about the money, and then your idea for business comes. For me, it was actually a lot more than that. For me, it was about, if I was to die tomorrow, what would other people's experiences of my life be if I was to share something of my life with them? Because, having come across that point where it's a very real possibility, even if it's just for a moment that you think you might die or you might not make it, you're still compelled to ask that question for a long time, even into your recovery as well. And some people laugh when I say that I had a near-death experience because they're like, "Okay, cool. Now you're qualified to be a speaker," because all of a sudden, you got this story behind you, and that's good enough. But I really believe that we all have a story. Everyone does, and it's actually that story, or at least becoming self-aware of that story, that it makes us realize that there comes a point where you got to stop running away from whatever it is that you're running away from and figure out what it is that you want to run towards. And the only thing that you can run towards is not really the money or the fancy car or the house or the sense of belonging. It's actually the kind of story you want to create into the future for yourself. The kind of story that you want to be able to present and share with other people that's completely congruent with the way that you're living your life right now as well.
Just taking it in, man. That's one of the big at some of these trainings you go to, what do you want your eulogy to be? That kind of comes up, and that's kind of like that. What do you want people to be saying about you after the fact? So go and create that story, and it has to start now. It has to start today. That story, that you're going to create for your whole time. Now,
yeah.
Now that's no. I really like that whole aspect of it, man. So like for me, like it's bringing up emotions even now, of thinking of the times that I've done that process myself. I don't know if have you ever heard of psycho-cybernetics?
Vaguely.
It's kind of like one of those things where you kind of it's kind of like it takes in a lot of visualization, visualizing yourself in that situation, doing something. It's kind of like that, that basketball thing. You get three people, line them up to a hoop. One practices for ages and ages. The other one visualizes doing it, and the other one does nothing at all.
Yep.
And so the one who visualizes gets much closer to the guy that actually practiced, and the guy that did nothing gets nothing. So it's kind of like that. So it's envisioning the end result and what people will say about you. It's kind of like has that aspect. So if you actually go over that, and then it's kind of because you've already imagined that situation, that helps you to therefore go and live your life that way. Like it's just I don't know, that sort of stuff affects me. So you envision that legacy that you want to leave behind. It's not about the money, not about the house. What's it really about for you?
For me, everything that I do comes down to two values, and to be really honest, I've only figured this out in recent times. In retrospect, it's probably something that I held. I wouldn't say throughout my life. I mean, I haven't, I'm not that old yet, but it's probably something I've held for a few years, and I've only come to realize it over the past few months, I'd say. And it's two things. One is love, and the other is service. And I really believe that when we as human beings, as individuals, as communities, as societies, and even as a human race, bring those two things together in what we do, as underlying values, bringing love together with service, we can make an incredible impact based on whatever unique skill sets and expertise that we have. So whether you are a doctor, or a lawyer, or a marketer, or a speaker, or a trainer, whatever it is that you are, or a community worker, if there are certain underlying values and principles that you can hold that will propel you forward to do whatever it is that you do much more powerfully and with much greater impact. So for me, that legacy is really about creating a story that is embedded throughout with love and service. And it's really important for me that I don't actually forget that. And I'll tell you how it applies to me practically, actually, because one thing I find, and relating this, the thing I love is that, often hearing me talk, people are like, well, okay, this is very philosophical and very spiritual. And what I love to do is actually make people understand how much this relates back to branding and marketing. Because for me personally, there is a lot of spirituality and philosophy that needs to go into thinking about a branding strategy. And what I mean specifically by this is a lot of people will spend time when they're building their business on building up a Facebook page and posting on social media, for example. And there's a lot of love in that sometimes, because they'll be like, I'm sharing the love with my communities, and I'm building an audience, and I'm creating a lot of love by putting out quotes and inspirational memes and things like that. And I've come to realize that if you ask these people, how is that contributing to your value of service, they often get stumped. Because organizations and entrepreneurs will spend so much time building up their brand that they don't bother actually going out there and working. They don't bother going out there and actually getting those customers. And it's something that Bill Walsh says a lot, actually, and he said to me once as well. He said, what's better than branding and marketing in business? What's really good for business? Customers. Customers are really good for business. and I love that, because to me it kind of reminds me that if you hold a value of love and service, you can't just keep putting yourself out there without actually serving somebody. So that's a really important part for my story as well. I want to actually be actively serving my audiences, my communities, my customers, my clients. Not just appearing to be a really powerful brand.
Yeah, so this is the thing where we can sort of go into it a bit now. How are you helping your customers, your clients, to incorporate everything we've just said, basically, from the legacy you want to leave behind, from, what do you want your eulogy to be? What do you want your story to be now? How do you go and incorporate all of that into the brand? Because the brand isn't this thing that's just kind of outside of yourself. Your brand isn't your logo. It isn't, it isn't a lot of the things that people think a brand is. Your brand is really the experience your customers have when they interact with you. I've heard it said too, it might have even been at one of these guys' seminars. It's like your brand is a promise kept. I really dig that. So how are you helping these people incorporate all of that into their brand?
Sure. Well, first I think a lot of it is about dispelling certain myths that go around the notion of branding. And one thing I find quite commonly that people think branding is about is they get caught up, even though the understanding of what it means to have a branding strategy is evolving a little bit, people are still, they kind of keep getting pulled back into this notion that branding is about graphic design, or it's about your social media activity, or it's about it's a fancy way of saying marketing, and it's about how you present yourself. And then if people consider themselves really involved in branding, they might think, well, it's about how you actually present your language and how you dress up when you're presenting yourself. And then they consider themselves personal branding experts. To me, all of these things are very essential and crucial elements that can go into a marketing strategy. But a branding strategy essentially is really about what's the underlying ethos and personality of a brand that influences your business strategy, that influences your marketing strategy, that influences the decisions that you make in terms of who you want to work with, how you want to work with them, and what kind of results you're going to get for your business and for your customers in the long run. And that kind of sounds a little bit, almost facetious to some people. But then when you actually start explaining what that entails, they start to get it. So there's a bunch of questions that you need to ask, and I like to break it down into 3 primary questions, and then there's a bunch of deeper questions that go into those questions. It's really simple, and I mentioned this at the start of the interview as well. One is, what is your message? What is it that you want to convey to the audience? And I specifically use the word audience, not because I'm a speaker, but I actually believe that in this day and age, the way that we've evolved with, given the way social media has evolved, given the way that our access as consumers, but also as creators, has evolved, people are really watching brands as audiences before they engage as customers and communities. And I guess you can appreciate this of all people because you value the importance of using interviews as a marketing tool, right?
Yeah, totally. This is everything that I do. Is my product, is my marketing, is my how I serve customers. It's all kind of wrapped up in what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So what I encourage my clients to do, and what I encourage viewers to do now, is to really take a step back from thinking about your customers and clients and start thinking them in terms of audiences. And if you were representing your brand and you got up on stage and you had 10 minutes to convey your message, it's kind of like an elevator pitch, but you're not actually pitching. You're just delivering a message that is complete with your entire value of what it is that you want to actually tell and give to your perfect audience. What is it that you would say to them? What is it that you would want to take away? Or you would want them to take away, from that 10 minutes, or maybe 15 minutes, or 20 minutes, whatever it is. But the point is that we all have a message, and it's amazing how unclear people are about what their message is, because they get caught up in thinking about what their product is, and what their service is, and what their solution is. And all of those things are very important, but what happens is when you have a very, I guess, cohesive and tight message that forms the foundation of all of those things, forms the foundation of your identity, forms the formation of your marketing strategy, forms the formation of your product line and your solutions. When you go out and start creating more products and creating more solutions for the different kind of audiences you build, and when you start automating, when you start scaling, when you start hiring more people, when you start outsourcing, it gives a kind of, a band to tie everything together, to make sure that everything is still held by the values for which you actually started doing what you do with. And what I found in my experience is that when you have that strong message that holds everything together, you're less likely to get stuck in your business, and it helps you keep loving what you do so that people can actually work on their business. And it's something that I found working with community organizations and social enterprises and creative enterprises as well. People get stuck in the operations of what they do so much that they go in with such high passion for what it is that they want to actually deliver to their audiences, to their markets, to the communities and customers, that they lose it. They lose it after a while, and then they don't love what they do, and they're just like, man, maybe I should just quit and go back to a 9-to-5 job. And that's my idea of worst nightmare ever. I know that I can't do that.
I reckon the majority of the people listening right now totally are there. They couldn't go back either, or they wouldn't. Yeah.
I remember the other day, it was a couple of weeks ago, someone came up to me and I told them that I was moving on from my position with a particular kind of job, and I was updating them on what was happening in my life, and I was telling them I'm going for a holiday for about 6 weeks at the end of the year, and when I come back, I'm going to be doing a lot of things from scratch. And they, for some reason, they took that to mean that I was going to look for a job. So they asked me, they're like, oh, okay, cool. So have you updated your resume? And I looked at them for a second. I was like, what is this resume you speak of? I had no idea what they were talking about. And then it started coming back to me. And I was like, oh, right, that thing, yeah. And it occurred to me that, you know what, I never want to have to update my resume again.
I've tried to put something together at some point when I got desperate towards the end of last year, and it was like, I can't do this. It's like, it's one of those weird things, like, you never say can't, and, you know, you can, of course you can. It's like, I don't want
Of
to. It's
course.
like, to put it down, yeah. I don't even want to think about talking about thinking about it. You know, let's move on. So, you were talking about it's first is the message, then what? I think it's a three-part thing you said.
Sure. The second is the audience. And like I mentioned earlier, the reason you want to think about it as audience is because in this day and age, the audience comes before the audience actually becomes your customers or clients, or even your leads or prospects, I would say. So you know those terms like you got leads, prospects, suspects, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, okay, in the sales process, you go find your leads, or you go find your suspects, and you find your prospects, and you find your leads, you convert them, and you have a conversion rate and all of that. What I actually believe is that way before all of that, or almost in like a parallel kind of track, you have an audience that is going to find you no matter what. And it's really up to you how you position yourself to be found. Because people kind of think that, if you don't position yourself in a particular way, then people are just not going to see you, they're not going to find you. But I think most people are catching on to the fact that these days the way Google works as well is someone's going to find you sooner or later who might be perfect to work with you, but they're going to get an impression for you, and either you're going to be the one in control of that impression, or Google is, essentially. And you may as well be the one in control of that impression because you're the one who's going to be able to communicate best to that person to help them actually get them what they need. Which is why you want to be really, really clear on who your audience actually is. And there are a few ways to figure that out. There's a lot of, there's a deep line of questioning that I go into when I work with my clients, especially one-on-one. But essentially, it comes down to this. Figuring out what your values is really helps. And figuring out what your personal values are and how they actually integrate with your business values really helps. Because at the end of the day, even if you want to work with a large corporation or a large business, you're still working with individuals. The decision makers are still people, and they still have their own set of values that may or may not integrate appropriately with their business. But what I really believe is that when people do actually integrate their personal values with their business values, that's when they start getting real success. And I say that because that's what's worked for me. And it's what's worked for a lot of people that I've kind of seen around me who have grown their businesses even more successful than mine. And in figuring that out, it really helps you kind of get clear about the kind of people that you want to align yourself with and the kind of people that you can actually do business with and to serve. And there's a lot that gets in the way of this, to be honest, because in my own experience, I've worked through a lot of these insecurities that, I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced, I've never worked for a large corporate organization. How does that get in my way? I don't have the kind of, public exposure yet that some big name entrepreneurs do. All of these kind of things. And I remember one thing that Jeff actually taught me, Jeff Slater. He told me this personally. He said, Dave, at the end of the day, you're going to have your perfect customer. And when you get to a point of that kind of real congruence between your values and your business values and figuring out who you want to work with, the notion of having competition gets completely eliminated. It's like there is no competition. And I really took that on board, and I really valued it. And I'm still trying to figure that out exactly, but ever since I started adopting that as a value, as an attitude, I guess, towards my business, and I started encouraging my clients to do the same, our success has just skyrocketed.
Okay, now listen, you're talking about audience.
Mm-hmm.
Something that interests me just a little bit back, was you want to be in control of what they see. So when they Google something, when they're looking for whatever you offer, and they happen to come across you, what can you do, or what do you teach people to do so that they can, to some extent, control the perception of you and your organization?
Sure. So the first thing I actually do is figure out who you want to disqualify. And And I guess some people think of this a little bit negatively, but I think it's really valuable to figure out who it is that you don't want to work with, because what I found is that there are a lot of people in the market, especially when you're starting out, who will say they want to work with you, and they'll want to work with you, but they're not necessarily ready to work with you. And what that ultimately creates is a whole bunch of tire kickers, knocking at your door, trying to get as much free value as they possibly can from you. And
I call them gunners.
Sorry?
Gunners.
Gunners.
I'm
okay.
gonna work with you. I'm gonna. Yeah.
All right. Gunners. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
exactly.
Look, out of the
Okay.
27 people I've checked out, you're the best one. So in 5 months' time, I'm gonna get the money together, and I'm gonna work with you.
Yeah, yeah. But the worst thing is where they say, I just need to have one more meeting with you to figure out whether we're going to work together or not.
Yeah.
Or let's have a coffee. Let's have lunch. Let's have dinner, and I'll get to know you a little bit better, and then we can work together.
Yeah.
And the point is that if you don't know how to recognize those people, you're gonna waste a lot of time. Essentially, you're gonna waste a lot of time filtering through people who are gunners. They're gonna work with you, but
Yeah.
they never actually do.
So how do you how do you decide? I guess it's part of that is being, if you're clear on what your message is, you're probably going to be a lot clearer on who your audience is, and how do you disqualify them once you're kind of clear?
Yeah, it helps. In my personal experience helps as well, because look, at the end of the day, experience is valuable in the sense that you can give someone a blueprint and a map of what to do, but until they walk the terrain, they're not really going to have a feel for it under their shoes. They're not really going to have a feel for who is a tire kicker and who isn't, who is a gunner and who isn't. And it's something that kind of builds up in your subconscious, I guess, in your radars or your filters. They get clearer about these things over time when you deal with it. Having said that, there are ways to, I guess, shorten the learning curve a little bit. And one of the ways that you can do that, which is it's a really simple tip, but it freaks a lot of people out, is to raise your prices. Mm-hmm. And it freaks a lot of people out because, especially the kind of people that I work with. So I'll give you an example, actually. I'll tell you a story. I had a conversation with an accountant the other day, and this accountant was telling me, I'm kind of, I've had this experience where my business is okay, but it's kind of like a job. These weren't the exact words, but this was the idea that they were getting at. And I could tell that this person was kind of tired, was a little bit frustrated by the position that they were in, and they had a lot of work. And I said, well, okay, look, have you considered scaling your business, doing something to be able to take on less work and still get the same amount of revenue? And they said, yeah, thought about getting other people in. And I asked them, I was like, what are your prices? And they gave me a certain figure, and I said, have you considered increasing your rates? And he paused for a minute, and he said, he got a bit nervous. He said, yeah, I've considered it, but I don't want to do it because my prices are very fair. And the funny thing is that I was sitting there thinking that, if you increase your prices, I would pay, and I wonder how many other people would pay. And I said, okay, tell me about your experiences of the kind of people that you work with. What causes you the most stress with the kind of clients that you have? And he said, well, the most stress that I get, I think I'm actually mixing two different stories of accountants here, but
that's okay.
Anyway.
The analogy will come across.
It will, yeah. And he said, the biggest frustration that I have is clients who basically dump on work and keep coming back, and they pay what I charge them, but then they take advantage of it, and they keep putting on more work. And I thought to my experiences of especially people who are freelancers, they have this experience a lot where they'll work with certain clients and customers, and they'll charge a really good rate or a really modest rate because they feel like that's their competitive advantage. And then people will say, okay, cool, I'll work with you. Your prices are really good. But then they'll keep coming back for more, and they'll keep coming back for more.
You're saying without paying extra, like just keep coming back to, can you do this? Can we add that in? And
exactly, yeah. They'll keep looking for value adds. And I think by trying to compete on price, you're actually training people to take advantage of you, because it's it's weird. It's almost like you're telling people that you don't need the money, and it's almost like you're influencing your customers and clients' relationship with money themselves. And I found it's a huge deal. And as soon as you start explaining to people that these are my rates and stand by them, you might freak a few people out, but the people who are willing to actually pay those rates, the people who are willing to come on board for you, once you've disqualified everyone else, those are the ones who are really going to take action.
Yeah, look, that's totally true. Like, here's an example where I've done some work with someone, like, say, done an interview, and the ones who haven't paid, because in the early days, for certain things, you do it for free, whatever it is, just to kind of get the ball rolling, get some work,
yeah, of course,
get a name out there, whatever it is. Across all industries, it tends to happen. So you do a bunch of free stuff, but then when you charge people for stuff, if you're creating content, say, for example, we create an interview specifically for whatever reason, the ones that get it for free, it's kind of like, oh, that was nice, did an interview, I was on the show, cool. They don't really do anything with it, but other people take it and go, wow, and they put it in front of everyone, and they get better results. People go, wow, respond to the interview, maybe opt into their website, buy some stuff, whatever. And the ones who pay actually go, well, I've got some skin in the game. I've paid for this. I'll at least got to break even, and they go out and they get some results. So it's kind of like that too. The ones who pay money, I guess, respect the value and actually go and work it. Where the ones who don't, it's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff and Kane commonly say, when you pay more attention.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's a very short way of saying what I just said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many people don't understand that concept. So that's one way of disqualifying people. The other way of disqualifying people, I find, is actually to be very, very explicit in actually stating who you don't work with. So one thing that I've been taught to always do on stage is, when I'm giving a presentation or running a training seminar, and if I do happen to upsell my consulting services or whatever it is that I'm upselling, to be very clear in stating that this is not for everyone.
So who don't you work for? Who don't you do? Who isn't what you do? Who isn't it for?
Well, it's exactly what we just discussed. People who don't have that relationship with money. It's like you were saying at the start as well. You're now working with people who have kind of crossed a certain threshold and are looking to take their business to the next level. It's very much the same. I find that there are people, it takes a certain capacity to work with people at certain levels. So if you want to work with people who are startups, who don't necessarily have much funding, you want to incubate them, it takes a certain level of energy, a certain level of resources, a certain capacity to be able to work with those people as well. And I guess a certain mental fortitude as well. And you might not necessarily be aligned with those people, but you think that you work with them because they're at the start of the chain. So it's kind of like, if I'm starting out, I may as well work with this people starting out as well, which is absolutely wrong, I found. It's funny how you can actually be more qualified when you're just starting out to work with people who have 20, 30 years of experience behind you. And it's weird, like it doesn't make sense.
Explain, like, could you explain how that process?
Yeah, sure. Like, I mean, my experience, for example, has been that I did the same thing when I started out. I said, okay, I'm starting out, so I'll work with people who are starting out, and we'll help each other out, and then we'll kind of both graduate towards working with people with more experience. But what I found was that the ethos that I had, the professionalism that I was bringing to the services that I was providing, was not actually suitable for those people, because what those people needed was maybe to go read a blog or go pick up a book. And what they were doing by putting money on the table, granted it was very little money, but they were putting it on the table to work with someone like me at that stage, was that they were getting an illusion of training themselves, almost like a seminar junkie, for example, or a training junkie, in feeling like they're doing something about their business. But the fact is that they were still in that exploring stage, and they were still trying to figure out what it is they wanted to do. But just because they were at the start of that journey, and I was at the start of the journey, I thought there was an alignment. So eventually, getting over that, what I started doing was working with people who were much more experienced, people who were managers of organizations, people who had been in business 20, 30 years, people who were much older than me, and speaking with people who were heads of departments or heads of organizations. And what I realized was, working with these people, the issue that I thought that they would have of me being very young or inexperienced actually wasn't there for them. Because what was valuable to them was the results that they were going to get, for one, and the solution that I was going to provide. And the credibility that I was able to do that really came from my articulation of my story and the way that I communicated what I actually knew and how I related to those people. And at the end of the day, each one of those people who has worked with me has not worked with me because of how many degrees I have, or who I've worked with previously, or how many years of experience I have. It's because of how they've been able to relate to me as a person, and then the security that I am actually able to deliver on what they need delivered.
Cool, and, man. That's unreal.
Yeah, and that's just the audience that I've connected with better.
Okay, so that's it. So you become clear. You've picked your audience because of your clarity. You can sort of easily disqualify who's not good for who you don't want to work with and who you do want to work with, how you can help them. And generally it's kind of, what's that? It's like punching above your weight. You might think you're down here, but you can actually add a lot of value to everyone. Like, not everyone, but you can actually add a lot of value to people who are further along the chain, they're looking for what you got. They're looking for what you got. They're not sort of concerned about anything really but results. They want results.
That's right. It's interesting you say that. Punching above your weight, because it's actually not punching above your weight. You just think you're punching above your weight, but that's actually where you should be punching. Whereas punching, below your weight, so to speak, is actually very dangerous, because you end up wasting a lot of time. You don't serve the people that you can truly serve, and the way I see it is that you're actually denying the people who really need your services, your solutions.
It's interesting too, because what I've found when you're working with sort of people, I'd say on your level, like where you think you are, when you're putting in alignment, saying, "Hey, we're both starting out," like you were saying, they don't respect you as someone. Wow, you can really help me here. It's like, "Hey, we're starting out." There's an equal playing field, but as soon as your value is kind of up here, the way you get this is from what I'm hearing about what you're saying. Tell me if I'm wrong. Is when you actually place your value up above that. Hey, I'm just helping people that are starting out as well. And aim for those people that are way further along. It's actually because they operate at such a level. They just look at you can help me. Okay. It's almost like they put you at their level. If they're thinking, wow, you can help me, they're bringing you up. They're kind of pulling you up to that point to want to work with you. They're thinking like, this guy's going to help me get the result. So they've elevated you in their mind as opposed to this person keeping you down.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Am I sort of getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very much about your branding as well. It needs to go into your branding strategy about how much you value actually doing business with people and how much you value just hanging out with people. Because some people, I've really found, I used to think that not everybody had it in them to be an entrepreneur, and I've realized that that's not necessarily true. But what I do know is that not everybody's in the position to become successful as an entrepreneur, even when they go to all these trainings, they go to a whole bunch of seminars, they work with mentors, they might even get private coaching with coaches or whatever. The reason is because they're going in it for the wrong reasons. Their whole idea is that they feel a sense of belonging, or they feel a sense of commitment towards progression by learning, without actually doing anything. And there are a lot of people in business who do that. And I would, encourage everyone to really challenge themselves and question themselves whether they're doing it. Because I've done it for years, and I know that, I started out that way, where basically I would think, okay, I just got to learn this one more thing before I'm ready. I just got to go to this one more seminar, and then I'll be ready to, get up on stage or sell or do this or that. But really, you're ready when you start doing something, and your value exactly. And I realized as well along those lines is that your value is very seldom actually determined by you. It's actually more determined by the people that you work with. which is also something it blows people's mind when they think about it, but then they start realizing that, yeah, if I did exactly the same thing that I'm doing now with a different audience, I would be charging twice as much, and it would have nothing to do with me doing anything differently. It would just be that's the kind of value exchange that happens in that world.
Yeah, totally, man. I'm a musician, so it's kind of like you can read all the music books you want, you can watch all the videos of all the top guys playing the stuff you want, but until you pick it up and start practicing your scales, you're never going to the fingers are never going to build those muscles. They're never going to get to the point where you can strum a few chords together and make a song until you get in the game. And sometimes it could take 3 years to really get that thing happening. And what I find is it's the passion that keeps you going through the blisters, through all the pain, and just that vision of, I'm going to play this song, I'm going to be able to play music, I'm going to, whatever you want to do. So it's the same in business, I found too. I kind of like draw a lot of analogies from learning an instrument in business. You can learn and learn and learn and learn, but it all means nothing unless you pick the thing up and strum it. And, yeah. So first of all is your message, your audience. What's next?
So the third sort of major component I find is language. How you're actually communicating what it is that you want to communicate to the people that you want to communicate to. And the reason I find this is really important is because where a lot of people screw it up is they build their language around themselves. So, your brand in many people's opinion is about you, and it's about basically leveraging off the kind of unique characteristics and personality traits that you have yourself. I actually disagree to some extent. In my opinion, a really effective branding strategy is a really good reflection of the relationship that you can share between yourself and your audience. And if that relationship is reflected in your brand, then you've already done half the work of communicating effectively with your audience. And you can do that through, your website, you do it through your copywriting, you can do it through your Facebook or Google ads, you can do it through the way that you ask questions on a comment on a post on Facebook, the little nitty-gritty details. And essentially, it does come through to being yourself. And I find a lot of people will say that, but at the end of the day, it's a very simplistic way of putting it, and not everyone understands what that means. What I find is the best way to approach the idea of language in the message audience language system is to figure out, firstly, what it is your audience actually needs to hear. What it is that they want you to say, basically. Once you've said that, once you've figured out what it is that they actually want you to say, you can start figuring out where, break it down and where that actually integrates with what it is that you need to communicate. Because another thing that's very very common in business, and I'm sure you've heard of this, is people will tell you, give people what they want. Sorry, sell people what they want and then give them what they need. Have you heard that before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
It's I've heard, actually, it was explained in my first ever episode of the Peter Montgomery show, which was with Jeff Slater.
Oh, with Jeff, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
he said it, the way he described it is Mum would put the vitamin in the smoothie for his sister. She wanted the smoothie, but she needed the vitamin.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That's a good one. Yeah. I think I first read it from Peter Drucker.
Yep.
He was kind of like one of the pioneers of.
And so, what would be an example of you giving someone what they want? Selling them what they want and giving them what they need.
Yeah. Okay. So, one that's probably more appropriate for your particular audience is selling people the notion that this is kind of interesting actually, because I've kind of revealed the curtains. I pulled the curtains back on what I actually do, and so much of what we've spoken about is not actually what I sell.
Yeah.
So what I actually sell really is getting people more appropriate customers, more money, and more time, and working on their business systems so that they can actually do that, and helping them leverage their branding and marketing strategy so that they can actually attract more of the kind of customers that they want to be working with and making more money from them. what they actually need in most cases is, no matter how experienced they are in business, what I found is a lot of businesses need to go back to the basics and figure out what their underlying brand values actually are. Even if you've sold very well and very successfully, even if you have a really decent customer base, it's amazing how much you can overcome any plateau or shoot through to the next level in your business success just by going back to the groundwork on reflecting on what your message is and who your audience is and what kind of language you need to communicate with them, so that you might be able to, it might not even be a redefining of your brand, but just a little tweak of your brand that makes such a difference. And when you do that, I find it becomes a lot more efficient to figure out where you need to make those tweaks as well. Because it might not be on your in your graphic design, it might be in your copywriting, it might not be in your copywriting, it might be in your video presentations or your video production quality. It might be in the way that you're actually communicating to your referral network to help pass on the word about your products and services. There are all these different touch points and different elements that you can work on that you just don't know where to start because it's so overwhelming for people that they don't take action. And if you start telling people that this is what you need to do, they'll be like, whoa, okay, let me take care of, what I know I have some control over first, and then I'll come back to you and I'll work with you on this stuff. Mm. Which is why you can't sell them that. You need to sell them what they want.
So yeah, you need to sell them first to then be able to work with them.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you say? In a sense, you're not selling them what they need to do. You're selling them the result that they're going to get if they work with you. Would that be it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you sell them on the result. Absolutely. Hey, look, you want to get more leads, more customers, and get more leverage in your business. So you sell them on that. Hey, look, when you want to do this, and you maybe share a few things, but on the back end, when they go, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, well, pay the money, let's do the thing, and then after, okay, great. Now to get more leads, customers, leverage, we're going to go through and tweak, blah 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 blah. And actually, when you're working with them, is when you deliver that stuff. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Absolutely, and it's something that's I know if your viewers have been following your show and they go back and watch other episodes as well, a lot of your guests have spoken about this concept as well. What I want to try and add to it is that a lot of people don't appreciate the value of doing this in your actual branding strategy itself. So where it comes into with language is, this is very it's fairly common sales principle to understand that you want to sell results. And then, you work on processes. Mm-hmm. If you sell processes, people don't tend to buy as much. What I want to add to that is that a lot of people, it's funny how when someone actually understands this, they still won't integrate it properly into their branding strategy. Because they'll integrate it into their sales process, but when somebody goes and does some research on, their touch points or their communication points or whatever, they're still putting so much emphasis on their own credibility, or their own backstory, or their own, their own processes working with other people rather than results. And I guess, granted that a lot of the people that you've interviewed and people that, friends of ours, mutual friends, and people that we know commonly, they do this really well because I guess we've all kind of had training from the same sort of people and it's been really amazing training. Mm. But see countless businesses out there who make this mistake of thinking that they understand this principle of selling results, but they still don't. They don't really integrate the idea of what that result actually is that they're selling into their brand strategy.
How do you do that?
Well, first you want to figure out what it is that your audience actually wants. And this is something that I find there's a principle in a lot of the entrepreneurship circles, and Jeff and Kane talk about this a lot as well, which is sell before you build, which is sell something out there, put it out there and see what kind of response you get. And then you're actually able to make sure that the product that you're offering, or the service or the solution that you're offering, is exactly to the specifications of what the customer has bought. What I found is that you can add another level to that, which is a certain kind of market research of digging into asking questions to people who your perfect audience might be about what it is that they're actually struggling with in their business, and figuring out what their understanding is of the gap between where they are now and where they want to be. Because I find when you really understand that gap in between, and when you understand what they think the bridge needs to be between that gap, you start getting clues as to what they think they need to start solving that problem. And don't get me wrong, it'll be very, very close and very, very much aligned with what it is that you can actually help them with. It's just that they might word it differently, or they might have a different set of language that they use for it, or they might you might come at it from this angle, and they think that you need to come at it from this angle. And ultimately, I think it's perfectly ethical to say that, well, you think you're coming at it from this angle, you're coming at it from this angle. What I'm actually selling is over here. So buy this, and then when you work with them, you can sort of negotiate that process of, let's actually come at it from here, and it'll be a lot quicker and a lot more efficient to get to the result. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm sure it's just going with your analogy of, they want to come at it from this angle, you want to come at it from this angle. When you understand what they perceive to be the problem, where they are, where they want to be, and that gap, and understanding the gap, I was thinking, what about if, I don't know if I've understood this right or not, they say come at it from this angle. What if you align what you do, leverage what their pain point is, I guess, where they're at, align what you do to fit in with there, so that's kind of like the leverage point. So you can now position what you offer, and align it with how they perceive what's wrong, and then they can see, I can see how your thing is going to help me get to there because I'm understanding it correctly. Is that a similar sort of concept?
No, you're absolutely right. But I guess what I'm trying to add to that point is there's a different aspect of it which a lot of people don't consider, which is that a lot of the customers and clients that you might work with already have a preconceived notion of what the solution should be to their problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people go into branding and marketing saying that, okay, I'm going to figure out what the problem is, what the pain point is, and align my solution to that pain point. You need to do that. You have to do that as well. You got to make sure that your leads and your audience actually believes that you understand and that you do actually understand their pain points. That's very important. The interesting thing is that a lot of people will have their, I'm going to throw a bit of an NLP term here, their ecology will be set up to accept certain kinds of solutions.
Yeah.
So what that specifically means is that their sense of reality will allow or will influence or tell them that, at a subconscious level, I actually believe that this is what the solution should be to this problem. And if you come in and tell them that actually the solution is this, and it clashes with their idea of what they think the solution should be,
right,
then they're not going to be open to working with you. And granted, I found that this is particularly true for very social conscious enterprises and entrepreneurs, and it's very true for creative entrepreneurs who are used to having a lot of control over the creative determination of the way things should work and processes. But I've also found that a lot of entrepreneurs that are starting up in the kind of expert industries, or people wanting to be consultants, coaches, trainers, speakers, even writers, they all share this common value that they want to be in control of not only what the problem is and understanding what the problem is, but what the solution should be. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you can come in and you can give them an idea of what the solution is, and they'll say initially at the start of the conversation that I have no idea what the solution is, this is what my problem is. And when you start talking about the solution, they'll turn around and say, actually, thanks for that conversation, but I think this is what the solution is, so see you later, I'm going to go work on this. And then unfortunately that solution doesn't help them. It's just they're doing it because they think that that's what they actually need.
Okay, so how do you make your solution, which will fix their problem if they execute it,
mm-hmm.
but how do you make your solution match their vision of what the solution is? Even though there might be two different things, they need to do X, you've got Y, but if they do Y, it'll work. How do you make your Y become their X?
Sure. So besides being absolutely clear on the results that you're selling, and getting very, very clear on what the results are that the person wants, it's to making sure that you can actually suss out whether whether they have any idea of what they think the solution should be or what they want the solution to be. I found that particularly useful for me, and I found a lot of people don't do that. They don't spend the time to, I guess, almost kind of pay respect to what kind of knowledge, what kind of expertise the client that you're dealing with actually has and brings to the table. And oftentimes, there's no nice way to say this. It's basically their ego that gets in the way at times, where they kind of want a sense of control of the process because that's just the kind of personalities that you're dealing with. And if you come in and tell them that, this is the solution, these are the results that we're going to give you, they'll shut you down. The way that I personally deal with that is I don't actually offer solutions anymore. What I offer is a relationship. And it sounds almost, a bit airy-fairy. And granted, there are some people it doesn't work with, it doesn't quite land with. But I know for a fact that in the kind of industry that we operate in, and the way that we brand the rest of ourselves, and when we're clear on our message and we're clear about our audience, it lands really well. And it's simply this: when somebody asks you what your credibility is, or what your, what the basis of this solution being the right one is, you want to really present yourself as not actually selling a solution or a result, but a relationship that is going to take them towards the result that they want. And the reason that you do that is because when people feel that you're establishing a relationship with them, and it's a very professional relationship, and it's a relationship that they've invested in, they're much more open to the idea of that relationship being equal, fair, and also very, very much negotiable, which means there's no, my way or the highway, or your way or the highway. It's very much about, let's go on this journey together and figure out this path. And then when we get to one result, we'll see if there's another result that we can actually achieve. This allows two things. One is it allows for a better experience in terms of your working experience anyway with the person that you want to work with. The other thing is, I find it allows for a lot of brand loyalty, because when people feel that they have a relationship with a brand, they're a lot likely to stick around for the story than they are to just stick around for a result. And the big cases in point are Apple, for example, or particular sports brands that people have incredible loyalties to. They don't necessarily just care about the actual solution that the product provides. They care about being part of that story, about being part of the relationship that they have with that particular brand. And I really believe that you can do that as an individual as well. You don't need to have a big multinational corporation with millions of dollars of products behind you. Even if you're selling a simple solution of, let's say, you're a personal trainer who is selling a solution of body transformation, you can still sell body transformation on top of the ethos of having that relationship with your perfect audience, rather than being such a dominant personality or that you want to sell your particular kind of solution and I guess bring up people's defenses so that they'll work for you until they get a result and then reassess whether they want to keep working with you or not. If you sell the relationship, they're going to keep working for you for that relationship.
How do you sell the relationship versus the result?
So just to be clear, it's very important to sell both.
Yeah.
Cohesively as well.
Oh, they need to know what's going to happen at the other end of this relationship.
Well, that's exactly the point. The relationship is ongoing. It doesn't really end. The point is that when you're selling a relationship, you're not actually defining a strict end point. What you're defining is like a check where we can say,
okay,
see
so you're more like selling the result that we're talking about. I want to help you get more leads, right? It's not like I'm going to help you get 100 leads. It's like, this is a checkpoint. Let's get to this point and see how it goes after that point. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll do this, and there's you get maybe one extra sale from this. So after that, we'll go, okay, has this been good? Yes. Do you want more of that? Okay, then here's what else I offer. If we stay in relationship, this is what you can expect more of, and we can even take it further. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And this is essentially what all the top coaches around the world do. Apparently, this is what I've been taught. This is what I understand, that once you establish that relationship really, really comfortably with somebody, and you have that rapport, they don't want to let you go because, when you have a certain level of success in business, you realize that there's no one point that you reach and then that's it. You don't need any support after that. It's an ongoing journey, and as any, just like all the professional athletes can tell you, and really successful business people will tell you, there's always room for more coaching, more training, and more mentorship. It's something that it really is a relationship that people want to invest in. It's not it's not just the result.
Okay.
And it's certainly a process.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just to have a beautiful segue. So if people want to form a relationship with you, where do they need to go? Where do they need to go?
Sure. So if you go to sketchpadideas.com, it's all one word, sketchpadideas.com. I'm sure you'll put the link.
They're going to put the links down there. Everyone, if you're listening out there in Radio Land, you just hearing the audio, make sure you get over to the petermontgomeryshow.com/Dev Singh, whatever it's going to end up being. You go there and find it. There'll be links there for you. Yeah, so carry on.
And look, I'd like to invite your audience to put their name and email address into the little opt-in that I've got. What I basically do is I send a series of emails to kick things off, which have a very few practical things that you can do with your branding and marketing strategy to get some really immediate results in your business. There are a couple of things that we've talked about in this interview and a couple of things that we haven't talked about. And I've personally found them really, really useful for myself. And the things that I keep revisiting as well. And I've got some great feedback from other people as well. And I'm not really one to, send a whole bombardment of emails. And obviously you can opt out whenever you like, as most of your audience already knows. But I wanted to offer a little special something to say thank you for having me on the show here as well.
Okay.
And what I thought I would do is I'd like to invite your audience to, once they've opted in, if they just send a reply from the confirmation address and just let me know that they've been sent from the Peter Montgomery Show. I'd actually like to offer a 45-minute strategy session with anybody who's up for it. I'll take about 30 people. I'm not really sure if I can take more than that at this stage. And obviously it'll be paced out according to schedule, but we can discuss that. Yep. But it'll be a 45-minute strategy session where I'll be very committed to making sure that you get one or two things really, really clear in terms of your actual results in leveraging your branding strategy as well.
Well, that's really generous of you, man. That's awesome. So 45 minutes with Dev, just for mentioning that you came through the show, and that's tops, man. Well, I'm cheering. Thanks for doing that, man.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, guys. So click on the links, go through to Dev's site, opt in, get all the great free stuff that he's going to give away. Well, it's not free. I once did an interview with Jerry Robert. He said nothing's ever free. There might be no charge, but it's not free, right? So this is valuable stuff, guys. And and then send him that reply email with just a quick note saying you came through the Peter Montgomery Show. Get yourself that 45-minute strategy session. I'm sure just spending this time with you, man, I could hear you talk all day long. Seriously, but we've only got a certain amount of time in this interview. I think I'm going to have to get you back on the show at some point and just keep going, man, because I don't know, something about your presence just soothes me. I just feel totally relaxed and I always learn heaps, man, when we hang out. So Dev, thanks for coming on the show, man. You've been an incredible guest, and I just invite everyone to go over there and get in touch with Dev.
Thanks. I'm very humbled to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Well, you make it a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.